Welcome to some potato information that we have today. My name is Philip Kauth. I am actually filling in for Emily, who is supposed to be here, but we've had some snow today, and so she couldn't make it into work. And so I'm her replacement today. And we have.
And I'm Stefan Mirsky. I'm the evaluation manager, and I do evaluations on the potatoes that we grow in the field every year. So yeah, we're gonna talk to you a little bit about potato collection, and then tell you some of the different traits that we evaluate on our potatoes, and then we're gonna taste these 9 varieties that we have in front of you here today.
So just a little bit about the potato collection. A couple weeks ago, Emily, who was supposed to be here, our tissue culture tech did a Facebook Live about the tissue culture lab and how we grow potatoes at Seed Savers Exchange. So I don't know if she mentioned anything about the overall potato collection, but just as a summary, we have about 700 potatoes in the collection, and we grow them all in test tubes in tissue culture. Maybe I'll come around the front here and show everybody again. So this is how we grow our potatoes in tissue culture. I'll show the Instagram people. So our 700 potatoes are all growing in test tubes, and when we grow them, want to grow them in the field, we'll take them out of those test tubes, put them in the greenhouse, bulk up the plants, and then send them out to the field, and that's where Stefan takes over. So we typically will grow about 30 to 40, maybe 50 potato varieties in a given year. The one really cool thing about the potato collection here at Seed Savers is that everything we grow out in the field has been tested to be virus free. So we do that in-house now, and we send it out to a company called AgDia over in Indiana, and they do all the testing to make sure that the potatoes are actually virus-free. The longer you grow potatoes in the ground, the potential it is for them to accumulate viruses. And so we will grow in a given year a potato. We'll take it from tissue culture, put it in the ground, and then we will grow that potato for 3 years. So we'll harvest the tubers in 1 year, and then 2 years, and then the 3rd year. And that next year we'll go back to tissue culture. So we're on a 3-year cycle, so that we are always going back to virus-free stock that 3rd year, just to make sure that people have fresh, clean, virus-free potatoes. And you can actually get these potatoes that we have in the collection on the exchange. So I'll sneak over here again. So this is our print yearbook. I've showed this before on our Instagram and Facebook Live videos before, but this is our document, our seed, basically our gardener to gardener seed exchange. And we list about 4,000 different varieties in here as Heritage Farm, but there are other people that list potatoes as well. So there's about 200 potato varieties on there. The one thing that you should know is that we don't grow a lot of potato plants in a given year, and so our quantities are pretty limited. So we may only have about 50, maybe sometimes 100 tubers to distribute of a given variety, and I think we have about 25 to 30 varieties that are going to be coming out in the 2021 yearbook, which will be out. We're going to start putting that together after Thanksgiving. So
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so as Phil said, we grow 30 to 40 varieties per year on average, and because those varieties are on a 3-year cycle, there's just a fraction of those varieties that came from tissue culture. The rest of them were actually planted from tubers that we harvested the previous year. So when we do our evaluations, we're really just mainly looking at those varieties that came from tissue culture, because we haven't seen those before. Those are new varieties that we've grown here at Heritage Farm for the first time, and we don't have any evaluation data or notes on those varieties. So So we do evaluations in the field on the vegetative characteristics of the varieties. We'll look at things like how leafy the plants are, the color of the leaves, the color of the flowers, whether they produce fruit, any disease, how resistant they are to disease, things like that. And then we do a more extensive evaluation on the tubers, and the characteristics that we look for in the tubers are things like the skin color, the texture of the skin. So, some are smooth skinned, others are flaky or russeted. We also look at the internal characteristics, so flesh color pattern, sometimes there are multiple colors. We also look at the eyes of the tubers, so you can have many eyes on a tuber, or there are sometimes fewer, and then the depth of those eyes, we record that. We also record notes on productivity, so number of tubers that we dig up, and size and shape of the tubers as well. So so this year we grew roughly a dozen varieties from tissue culture. And we've got 9 varieties that we cooked up, and we are going to be taste evaluating those. Phil and I actually this is the first time we're going to be tasting them. And so there's certain characteristics that we look for when we do taste evaluations. And that includes things like the texture of potatoes, obviously the flavor, like how sweet it is. There's sometimes bitter compounds or other sort of off flavors in potatoes, and so those are some of the characteristics that we look for. The main one probably being the starchiness of the potato. So the starchier a potato is, typically the lighter and fluffier it is, whereas the less starch, it's usually more waxy. And your starchy potatoes have different uses than your waxy potatoes, and so that'll affect how you cook with the potatoes. So we're gonna go through these one by one, and we baked them. We roasted them. We cut them up and roasted them without salt, without oil. So it's just
dry roasted potatoes. That's how you get the right flavor. So it's totally pure, unadulterated, just straight up roasted potatoes.
Yeah.
The other thing I should let people know is if you're interested in getting potatoes from the exchange, and we'll let you know if a potato did come from tissue culture in a particular year, because it's really important to know that if we send you potatoes and you get them and they're tiny, it's because typically speaking, potatoes that come from tissue culture in a given year don't produce very large tubers. So some of them may be the diameter of a quarter. There may be a lot of them, but they may not be very big. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to grow when you plant them. They will grow just fine, and they will produce a plant, and you'll get a lot more tubers and bigger tubers that second year when you grow them. So just keep that in mind.
And I see we have a question about the number of eyes and the depth of the eyes on the tubers, and why is that important? So for culinary purposes, it's important because, generally speaking, the fewer the eyes, the better when you're cooking. It's just easier to clean tubers that have fewer eyes, because that's where the soil tends to stick. And then if you get tubers with really deep eyes, the soil really gets lodged in there, and they're hard to clean and harder to peel. You just end up wasting more of the potato.
So, So the 9 we have Spalding Rose, we have Teton, Yampa, Cups, DeSoto, Glenmere, Satapa, Shetland Blue, and Burbank. You may be familiar with Russet Burbank. Russet Burbank was basically a mutant off of Burbank potato, which is smooth-skinned, and the man that developed this potato, Luther Burbank, which is where the name comes from, was digging up his potatoes one day and noticed this russeted version of his Burbank. And so Burbank is smooth-skinned, Russet Burbank is that flaky, russeted type skin, and which is now like the world's most popular potato.
Oh.
So every time you go to a restaurant, basically you're eating Russet Burbank, which is a potato that was developed over 120 years ago. Which is kind of cool.
That's
to
really
think
cool.
that it stuck around this long. So,
Yeah.
and of course, Russet Burbank was made famous by McDonald's.
Yeah.
Back in the 50s. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we have some info about these particular potatoes as we're going along. Some of the history that we've collected of these particular varieties. So
Yeah.
let's start
We
there.
can start on this end. So the first variety we've got is one called Spalding Rose, and this was a release in the early 1900s. It's a little bit funny. There was a USDA publication in 1951 that mentions this variety and how it was popular, commonly grown in Florida in the early 1900s. But by the time of the publication in 1951, basically the potato was not grown anymore in Florida, and so it said it's of no commercial use, really.
So it hasn't been around for a really long time.
Yeah,
It's kind of cool that we brought it in.
Yeah.
Got it right, it was free, so we'll see. I used to live in Florida and was, if anybody was wondering, like, why Florida potatoes? Florida is very sandy soil, perfect condition for growing potatoes. In the north central part, I used to live about an hour south of there, and going to the beach, we'd drive through a place called Spuds, and it was nothing but potato fields all over the place. So, you want to?
Yeah, so maybe there's a good reason that it was no longer grown commercially. Maybe it has to do with the taste. We'll find out.
Another question: what kind of potato was Mr. Potato Head? No clue, but my guess is probably a big old Russet Burbank potato. What's the best potato for hash brown? I don't know. That's a good question. Play around, see what.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, you're going to if you get potatoes at the store, you get a couple different varieties, and that's about it. My guess it's probably a Russet Burbank that most like frozen hash browns at the store is. So.
Yeah. I guess it depends if you want your hash browns really dense or if you want them
Yep.
kind of lighter and fluffier.
So yeah, Spalding
So-
Rose.
Spalding Rose. You want to taste it, Phil?
Yeah. So we'll see, and what we're looking for is what the texture is, what the flavor is. Sometimes you get a lot of bitterness in potatoes, especially with some of these older varieties. This one, in my opinion, is kind of more starchy. It's a little fluffier.
It's a little lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle, maybe.
Yeah.
Which potatoes grow better in bags? Good question.
You can pretty much grow any potato in potato bags if you know what we're talking about. We have a member Curtzio, who grows all of his potatoes in bags and lists 100 plus potatoes in the exchange every year. So he makes notes about ones that grow really well. He said he had really good success this year with his potatoes. But try it out. There really aren't many potatoes that you can't grow in bags. So
Yeah, potatoes are a pretty easy crop.
Yeah.
And,
as long as you give them a good supply of water,
right.
and they'll be fine. So
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought this was a pretty good one. Kind of starch in between starchy and waxy texture for me.
Yep.
But maybe a little more starchy.
Yeah, so when you find one that's has the balance of fluffiness and waxiness, it's probably a good potato for boiling. It'll hold up pretty well.
Yeah.
It's probably a good all-around potato. Roast it, boil it, mash it, and see what happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, moving on to Burbank.
I gave you the history of Burbank already,
Yeah.
which is a really cool old potato.
Yep.
So this one was actually released by J.J.H. Gregory, which was a seed company, in 1876, and they listed it under the name Burbank Seedling.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the texture is really different from a russet Burbank. It's much creamier and waxier.
Waxier. Yeah, your russet Burbank is typically like that classic starchy, fluffy potato.
Yeah.
This one is not like that at all.
No.
Very waxy,
Yeah.
very heavy to feel in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So this one would be great for roasting.
Yeah.
Yep, it'll hold up really well.
Good for roasting. Also, if you want to put it in like soups and stews, it would probably hold its texture.
Yep.
Potato salad probably too.
Yep, waxy potatoes are good for potato salad.
Yeah.
Next one is Teton. This was a 1946 USDA introduction. It was bred for resistant to ring rot. And the flesh, publication I found from 1946, flesh is said to be moderately mealy with a pleasant flavor. Whatever that technically means, we'll find out here.
Also kind of creamy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no off flavors,
Nope.
which is pretty common in potatoes.
Sometimes, like I said, you get that bitterness, or sometimes some potatoes have a metallic flavor to them.
Yeah.
This one is just kind of very mild tasting. So this one would probably need some doctoring up with some herbs and spices and things like that. So Yep. Shetland Blue.
Shetland Blue.
So this one we didn't have much history on. This one is called an exchange heirloom, which means that it had been exchanged with members of Seed Savers Exchange in our exchange yearbook, and it had been in the yearbook for over 30 years. So it first appeared in I think the 80s, and it had been exchanged for quite a long time. But one of our members says that it seemed to be a waxy potato with thin skin. He said try to pan roast it with the skin on. And he also noted that, so he had been growing this one for a while and said that it's pretty round, and he said that every year he'd grow it, the tubers were very small. And so some potatoes, they just don't get baked, so this is probably one where it's just a smaller potato, and probably, according to Critio, probably good for roasting whole, is my guess.
Yeah, I would say most of the tubers were like ping pong ball size or smaller. And sometimes we see that the first year that they're growing from tissue culture, the tubers are just smaller. But apparently this one doesn't size up.
Yep, doesn't size up.
It's also a really pretty color. So the skin is a dark, you can't see this, but it's a dark purple black color, and then the flesh color is like a deep yellow.
It's kind of like a creamish color.
Yeah. And it's got a purple ring around the outside of the flesh, close to the skin. So.
So this one I thought was pretty starchy. Actually, I know Curtio said waxy, but I found some starchiness to it as well. Not very sweet, maybe some bitterness in there.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of bitterness.
Yeah. more so than the other ones. And sometimes I can taste a little bit of that metallic flavor.
Yeah, it's usually an aftertaste. Like you don't taste it right away, but yeah, it takes a few seconds, and it's definitely taste it. It kind of lingers.
Yep.
No, not my favorite.
Mine either, but you know,
really
someone might love it. So
yeah.
Moving on to Yampa, which is spelled Y-A-M-P-A. This one was a variety that was first described in the American Potato Journal in 1949. And it was released as a new scab-resistant potato, and they also said it was resistant to early blight, which is really important. Early blight is a pretty terrible disease, and it will just wipe out potatoes throughout the season. So luckily, some of the we make notes of that. Stefan mentioned that, and some of the potatoes we have are just like full bulletproof when it comes to early blight, which is great, and we make notes of that in the descriptions that we have in the exchange. This one also says above average cooking qualities. So again, 1949, who knows what that means?
Yeah.
Things have changed over the years.
Yeah, and words like average don't mean a whole lot to us.
Yeah. Someone said, can you tell the difference in taste according to the color of a potato? Not really, but sometimes the potatoes that have a little bit more purple-blue tend to have a little bit more of a distinct flavor to them. The anthocyanins tend to maybe be a little bit more on the bitter side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But with potato, that's with a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
You know that whatever causes their pigmentation, the anthocyanins definitely have a flavor.
Yeah.
It's more of an intense, lingering flavor, like a kind of a tannic.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. But those anthocyanins are very good for you.
Yes.
At the same time. So eat your blue and purple potatoes.
Yeah. All right. So Yampa.
Yampa. Another one that's kind of a little bit on the sweeter side.
Definitely sweeter.
Kind of in between starchy and waxy.
Yeah. I really like this one.
Yeah.
The sweetness really hits you.
I find some savory notes in there too.
Yeah.
It's actually my sides of my tongue are starting to water a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit. So it's a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this has anything to do with the sweetness, but when we roasted it, is the darkest one. And sometimes if you get sweeter potatoes, those sugars tend to caramelize more in the oven, and that might explain why it's a little darker on the outside.
Yep. Good observation.
So the next one is Setapa, and let's see. This one was introduced by the University of Minnesota in 1949. Apparently it holds up to boiling really well, so it must be more of a waxy texture. The uniformly round and smooth tubers have really shallow eyes, and apparently make this variety very well suited for restaurant and hotel use where automatic peelers are used.
Keep in mind this is from a 1949 publication.
Yeah.
So apparently if you're using an automatic peeler, this one is fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know how many of you have automatic peelers out there, but
so out of the entire group, this is the starchiest one.
I agree.
Super starchy.
Yeah.
Probably would be great for mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because you want starchy, fluffy potatoes.
Yeah.
For mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
So I think this one would be, if you're looking for mashed potatoes, this is the one out of this group.
I agree. It's the lightest, it's the fluffiest.
I actually really like this one.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And apparently it holds up to boiling well too, which is usually not a characteristic of starchy potatoes, but this one, maybe the skin is a little thicker, or I'm not sure.
Yep. So moving on, we have one called Cups, which is a kind of a weird name for a potato, but it's a really old variety that appeared in. So there was a horticulturalist named Fearon Burr who wrote a book in the 1860s called Field and Garden Vegetables of America, and he had this one called Cups in that publication. So it's a super old potato variety. The one interesting thing is that Fearon Burr said better suited for agricultural purposes than for the table. So when you see something like that from the 1800s, you kind of start to wonder, I wonder what people are using this particular potato for.
Yeah, we were trying to think of what he could have meant by that. Because normally an agricultural crop is meant for the table, unless it's for livestock or
I don't know what else people giving livestock potatoes.
No.
We'll see. We'll find out, right? We'll be brave.
Maybe for your methane digester. Who knows?
Maybe. It's definitely okay.
Yeah.
Not the best one of the groups. There's some that metallic bitterness to it again.
Yeah, it's just setting in right now.
For sure.
And it's a mild flavor. It's not very sweet at all.
Yeah. Someone said, will you be posting the results of this tasting? Sure, yeah, we can definitely do that. And what I'll also do is I'll go on and write the names of these particular varieties. If anybody's really interested in it. So Cups, it's a really old potato variety. That's kind of what they were back in the day.
Yeah.
So, all right, next one is Glenmere. Not much on this one. It just said released for increase at the Rochester meeting of Empire State Potato Club, 1946. So
yeah,
we'll check it out here. Another starchy.
More starchy than waxy.
It's kind of that classic russet Burbank flavor to it.
Yeah.
Just you eat it and it has that starchy flavor to it. Yep.
It's pretty sweet too. Sweeter than some of the other ones.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a good tasting one.
Yeah.
None of that.
That'd be another good one for mashed potatoes
Yeah.
and roasting and things like that. So, Yep. All right, the last one we have is called DeSoto. This one was a 1948 potato bred by Louisiana State. So listen up, Southern people. This was adapted to, it says adaptability to Southern climates, disease, and storage qualities. So because it was bred in Louisiana, really nice Southern potato, apparently, and named after the Mississippi Valley explorer DeSoto, which is interesting because they released at the same time Lesota and LaSalle were also explorers. This one is supposed to be resistant. They said resistant to mosaic. Now, the interesting thing is that what mosaic are you talking about? Because there's a lot of different. When you see mosaic, that means mosaic virus. So this one was really interesting because before we do our potato cleanup, we send them in to Agdia to test them before we send them in. And this one came back completely virus-free before we did any virus eradication methods on it at all. So it's really cool to see that after all these years, this early publication that said it was resistant to mosaic, it came true.
Yeah.
Yep. So we'll check it out here. This one's very nice. It's probably
really
the sweetest of the group. If you like a sweeter potato, kind of in between starchy and waxy, maybe a little bit more on the waxy side.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So great for roasting.
Yeah.
Nice disease-free potato if you're interested in that. So.
And it's a red-skinned one.
Yep.
It's also kind of aromatic. I feel like there's some complexity of flavor beyond some of these other more mild ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes you're eating potatoes and those sweet ones have a little bit of a fruitier taste to them. But yeah, really nice variety there. So, any other questions coming in? I don't really see any other questions. Like I said, if you're interested in these varieties, we will be listing them in our exchange. We're preparing that right now. The new listings will get uploaded, and I think the website will go live sometime in December, and then the print yearbook goes out in January. So, all right, I think that's it. Do you have anything else to add, Stefan?
No, just we use this information, this flavor evaluation to write variety profiles of all these, and hopefully you'll all order some of these and